Well, we continue our coverage of the AGOA Forum that is underway here in Nasrec. But earlier on, we heard from the president of the country, that is Cyril Ramaphosa, as he gave the marching orders to the various delegates who will be discussing some pertinent issues. And one of the major ones that the president mentioned towards the end of his speech is this issue around the length of the AGOA agreement. Should it be a 10-year interval or should it be extended to 20 years? Yesterday, I was actually speaking to one of the executives from Standard Bank, Philip Myburgh, who said that one of the issues that they find that is a concern is around certainty. Unfortunately, when you have the AGOA having to go back to the House of Representatives in the US for ratification for the extension, is that it deals with the issue around longevity and what does it mean for certainty. And we know that business wants certainty. Let's bring into the conversation now SABC News International News Editor Sophie Mokena to speak about the president's speech. And the sense that I got from that speech as well, Sophie, was that it is not AGOA South Africa, but is AGOA Africa.
It has always been about Africa. And it is for that reason the president didn't drop the ball. He knew very well that this is an agreement that covers African countries. And as he pointed out, when you look at countries that are really benefiting, you have Lesotho and Kenya. And these countries, they are playing a role in terms of us talking about this agreement. And therefore, he did ensure that he is able to talk about issues that affect all African countries, including the very same ones that are benefiting from AGOA. He even went as far as bringing in the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, how you ensure that the synergy, because the African Continental Free Trade Area is focusing on African countries doing business amongst themselves. Because you want a situation where there are challenges. For example, during the COVID-19, when there were problems of supply chain, you are not suffering because you are having your own products that can sustain you. During the war in Ukraine, when everybody was complaining about the grain, why Africa can't have grain? Why can't we be a food basket of the world, particularly when you look at the amount of land we have on the continent? And therefore, you could pick up that the president knew very well that this is not a South African story, it is an African story.
And that is, even though South Africa continues to be the major beneficiary out of AGOA. But the point also that the president raised there towards the end, as I was saying now in my opening remarks, is around how long AGOA is in place for and the intervals. And sometimes that intervals does cause some level of disruption. Even the Minister of Trade from Lesotho was saying that they are hoping to see it being extended to 20 years. But as the US representative said to me yesterday, unfortunately, it's not all up to Joe Biden. It goes to the legislatures as well.
Yes, you are correct. You'd recall when there was this noise and standoff around Lady R, you had a situation where congressmen, bipartisan, both the Democrats and the Republicans, talking about not renewing this agreement, particularly in relation to South Africa, in other words, exclude South Africa. And therefore, you are correct. When you look at this agreement, you have to look at its how long you can have it, because then you can plan better. And as you pointed out, it will be up to the Congress. And that is why in his speech on Monday or statement, President Biden pointed out that he is going to work with speed to negotiate with the Congress and the partners on the continent, he didn't say South Africa, to ensure that they are able to deal with this, taking into consideration the elections in the United States of America next year. And that is why when you listen to President Ramaphosa, he has called for a renewal and also it must be much earlier. And when I spoke to Dr. Sydney Mufamadi, the President's Security Advisor, I would recall we were together, when he was talking about the fact that you want to bring this renewal forward so that there's that stability, and added to that it's the 20 years that the Minister of Lesotho spoke about. And I think you were spot on in terms of the people you spoke to yesterday on SAFM in relation to what are the concerns and what needs to be done to ensure that this agreement continue to work. But as the President pointed out, we have to do more as the continent to utilize this agreement.
And speaking about some of the concerns, the Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Chaveni, saying after this is now the African Continental Free Trade Area's head was delivering his opening remarks, saying that yesterday there were concerns that were raised by business, amongst the issues, of course, relating to infrastructure, but a dispute mechanism has now also been brought in to try and deal with these issues. But the head of AFTA is also saying that AGOA shouldn't undermine what they are planning.
Yes, you are correct. The issue of infrastructure is very important. I spoke to the CEO of BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and also a representative of Ford company in South Africa. All of them, the concern is infrastructure, including the port, so that you are able to move the goods. And on the continent as well, the African Continental Free Trade Area, currently they are focusing on developing a better infrastructure on the continent, because even to move goods on the continent is a problem. If you talk about that value chain, you might get some products in DRC or in Kenya or in Lesotho. You need an infrastructure, roads, rail, that is very good and up to the task, because transport is a lifeblood of commerce.
Yeah. And speaking about that issue around logistics, if you look, for instance, and Minele also spoke about this issue around colonialism, is that the way that the infrastructure has been built and designed, it was built and designed to go to the ports, and once they arrive at the ports with the intention to be exported to Western countries, how do we reimagine that and what does it look like? But that conversation also speaks about beneficiation. We know the former president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, has been going on and on and on about this issue around the beneficiation, but we're still having that conversation and we haven't gotten it right as yet.
You are correct. We've been talking about these issues. Implementation is a challenge, and the president also this morning spoke about beneficiation. You can only do that when you have skills. So building skills on the continent is quite critical. You would recall South Africa at some point in time went vigorously to try and build capacity, as Giza and all those projects where young South Africans were taken out of the continent to other countries, particularly those countries that are doing well in terms of manufacturing, to acquire skills so that they can come and build a better value chain in terms of skills availability when you want to do these things. And therefore, you have to focus on education with the aim of taking it to a level of skills development. And I think that is a key challenge for the continent. And you move these products on the continent. If you don't have infrastructure, if you don't have skills, the continent will remain being the same African continent, and therefore we have to move with speed with the issue of infrastructure. South Africa must do something about the issue of infrastructure. The country will go down if they don't pay attention to the issue of infrastructure.
Thank you so much for your time. That is Sophie Mokena, our international news editor here at the SABC. And the emphasis, of course, has been it should be more about trade and less about aid. And will they succeed in this conversation? And also, how do you broaden up some of the various industries that are not as yet included in AGOA to make sure that more African states are able to benefit from AGOA? Then, of course, the other controversial one is the 4 countries that have now been expelled from AGOA. Will those countries be reinstated, or will there actually be an argument to make around why those countries should be reinstated in the AGOA agreement?